Hello, and welcome to Good Grief, a podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief and loss with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach here in Columbus, Ohio. And unfortunately for you, I'm a comedian. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new here, that would be because this is the first episode. So I kind of figured I would just take the opportunity with episode 1 here to just introduce myself, tell you a little bit about me, my favorite subject, and kind of give you an idea of what you might be in for here with this podcast. So yeah, as I said at the beginning, I'm Nikki. I am an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And yes, I do have a background in comedy, not stand-up per se. I guess I'm just a smartass, but I do have a long history of improv comedy performing since 2004 or so. Anyway, you may have just asked out loud or to yourself, what the heck is an end-of-life doula? So I'll get into that quick, although this podcast is really going to be more focused on grief. But in case you haven't heard of end-of-life doula work, basically, I guess the quickest way I could put it is, it's like a birth doula ushers life into the world, and end-of-life doula ushers life out of the world. So that's the briefest description I can say. But basically, I work with the dying and their families to help ease the transition from life to death, giving the dying person the death that they want and deserve. And a big part of that is assisting both the dying and their family and loved ones processing their grief, because even the dying person is grieving because they're, grieving the end of their life. I also became a certified grief coach, which is more the subject matter for this podcast. I have not done these my entire life. In fact, this is all relatively new to me-ish. At least the practicing these things is new to me. I spent most of my life in corporate America, most of my adult life, that is, working various office jobs throughout the years. And once my midlife hit, I did what a lot of people do, reevaluated where I am and what it is I'm doing with my life, and is what I'm doing fulfilling? And the answer to that was a resounding no. If corporate America is fulfilling to you, that's wonderful. It was not for me. It's not for a lot of people. So my mid-40s hit, and then COVID hit. And I think that's a time when a lot of us were reevaluating our lives, right? And trying to find what's more meaningful to us. And this work is meaningful to me. So here we are. I received my training as a doula through the International End-of-Life Doula Association, also known as INELDA, and my training for grief coaching through the Institute for Life Coach Training. I also had extensive training in crisis de-escalation, which is a fancy way of saying suicide prevention, through the suicide hotline here in Columbus, Ohio. I've been a volunteer there for many, many years. So I have a little bit of experience with that too. And I guess you could say I have a ton of experience with grief, but don't we all? In 2015, I lost my only brother suddenly. He passed away. And after that, we all had to learn to navigate this new world of grief. Grief is something that touches all of us at every point in our life. It's not just after a significant death. We experience losses all the time. Losses of jobs, friendships, personal property. I mean, just anytime something is removed from your life, it is a loss. You have lost that thing or that person. And with loss comes grief. Grief is a part of our every single day, honestly. It shapes who we are and how we feel and how we react to subsequent losses. And I'm going to get this out early. This is something you will hear me say many times throughout this podcast, on probably every single episode, because it's something I say all the time. This is a big spoiler alert, you guys. You are not going to get over your grief. Grief is not something you get over. It's not an event that happens and ends. Grief is something that you feel and is part of you for the rest of your life. Now, that's not to say that, when you experience a significant loss, you're going to be sad for the rest of your life. You're going to cry for the rest of your life. You're going to be depressed. That's not what that means. Having grief doesn't necessarily mean grieving or being sad or depressed or all the, emotions that are culturally considered to be, quote, bad. Another spoiler alert, you guys. Emotions are not bad. There are no bad emotions. Emotions are just that. They're emotions. So you will not get over your grief. It will become a part of you, and you will learn to live with it and walk with it. So we will be talking, like I said, I'm going to bring that up probably every single episode to just constantly remind you that you will not get over grief. Never tell somebody to get over it. I had a therapist tell me to get over it once. She's clearly not my therapist anymore. So we will talk about all manner of grief topics in this podcast. We'll talk about non-social norm griefs, also known as disenfranchised grief. I'm going to do an entire episode on that, but it'll come up in probably a lot of other episodes as well, because there's so many types of disenfranchised grief. We will talk about misconceptions of grief. We're going to get into Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I won't say anything else now, but we definitely will be discussing the quote-unquote stages of grief. Other great things we can look forward to, I'll be doing probably some book reviews, definitely some book reviews, because I have read a lot of material and plan to read a lot more material on grief-related topics. And there are some beautiful, beautiful things out there that I would like to share with you. I very likely will have nothing but good things to say about the books I read. I haven't read any grief-related material yet that I hated, so they're probably going to be great reviews. I ingest, maybe it sounds morbid, but I ingest a lot of material, a lot of media related to death, dying, and grief, but that's because that's what I do. So there will be articles I'll probably share and talk about studies that are being done or have been done. There's some really cool studies right now on hallucinogenics, which is really cool in the treatment of mental illness and depression. So psilocybin specifically. Ooh, say that 5 times that fast. Psilocybin specifically. I also intend to do some interviews. I have a lot of people lined up that I'm going to have on this podcast to talk about their life and their grief and losses, which I promise you guys, these aren't all going to be sad. This isn't going to be a sob fest. My husband and I have some really funny stories surrounding some of the deaths that sounds morbid, but we've got some fun stories surrounding people we've lost. But there's joy in talking about your grief and talking about your losses, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a good way to cope and learn to walk with your grief, is to face it and talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. So gosh, I guess that's me and this podcast in a bit of a nutshell, but not like those nutshells you get in their pistachio bag that's like impossible to open. It's fused shut and you like have to go at it with a Nutcracker and then you destroy the nut inside. Like, not that kind of nutshell. Like a peanut shell where you just squeeze the end and it just blissfully splits in half and shows you the lovely inside. We're gonna squeeze my end and beautifully split me in half to discover the nut inside. I really went off the rails there, didn't I? Well, at least you know what to expect. Thank you so much for checking me out, checking out this podcast. I'm very excited about this. This is the first time I've been a guest on other podcasts before, but I've never done my own. And it definitely feels a little weird to just be staring at Audacity on my computer screen while talking into a microphone with nobody around me. But here I am in my bright turquoise painted office in Columbus, Ohio, with my finger hovered over the pause button for the massive amount of traffic that seems to go by my house every single day. So you'll probably hear a stray motorcycle I don't catch in time, but that's neither here nor there. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. I really look forward to talking to all of you, and I would love to hear from you. You can find me online at Nikki, Nikki, the Death Doula. So it's nikkithedeathdoula.com. Check out my website there, and you can contact me through that if you would like. If you have a topic or something you'd love to hear about, please let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're well. Take care of yourself. And just remember that grief doesn't always have to be sad. Grief is whatever the hell you want it to be. Good Grief was brought to you by me. You can find me online at nikkithedeathdoula.com. Today's episode was produced by me. Research and scripts written by me. Your host is me. Editing and sound design also me. Music is not me. Music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. License information can be found at filmmusic.io/standard-license. Special thank you to my best friend and husband for constantly reassuring me that I don't suck.